So plant medicine, extremely powerful tool. Obviously, it has continued to expand in popularity around the globe. But there are a lot of concerning developments and there's a lot of confusion in the world because it has become trendy. And with trendiness, a lot of ego enters into the situation. Just like it's, in a lot of ways, I think humanity never really leaves the high school mentality. Celebrities kind of have that going on. The United States basically is high school forever. Popularity contests and conformity contests. How well can you conform to a narrative? And if you consider that plant medicine and psychedelics draw a lot of people that have a lot of traumas and a lot of stuff that they need to heal, that generally causes self-esteem problems and ego issues. That's how you compensate. So there's a tremendous amount of ego. And so you end up with all of these plant medicine Karens. Everyone insists the Dieta should be done a certain way, that the Icaros should be sung exactly a certain way. When in fact, in reality, Icaros are performed traditionally differently every single time. Depending on the circumstances, there's supposed to be a sort of interactive interface going on with the energy of the patient being healed. So we have so many different influences kind of obscuring what actually is the proper protocol and what is the proper approach. What is a relationship to a spirit? What is a spirit? Is cultivating a deeper relationship with the medicine a matter of giving more power over to a spirit, more power over our lives to some spirit? Are these spirits even real? Another thing that I've noticed a lot is that people will have voice in their head. This is completely common at this point, and they will pursue the instructions of this apparent plant spirit, and then they'll be disappointed when whatever was promised by this plant spirit doesn't turn out to be real, right? So in this stream, I'm going to give some advice in terms of at least how I deal with it. I can't tell you really what's going to be appropriate for you because every single person has a different relationship with themselves and a different relationship with the universe. But I can tell you in some cases things that are perceived as being traditional that definitely are not. For example, I basically promote a syncretic or hybrid approach to plant medicine. And a lot of people find fault with that and say that we should maintain only the traditions. And the reality is that I have seen exactly one person in 5 years in South America that is actually completely conforming to traditional ayahuasca practice. One person. There are a few tribes that there are exceptions to this, but in general, if you're in a group setting drinking ayahuasca, that is not traditional. There's nothing traditional about that. And furthermore, even for the tribes where there is an exception in terms of the group ayahuasca ceremony, you would never drink ayahuasca with a bunch of strangers. If you consider the concept of the Dieta and the aspect of it that your energy becomes very open and you become extremely susceptible to the influence of whoever's there, does it really make sense to you that you should drink ayahuasca with a bunch of strangers that could be carrying any kind of conceivable history? I mean, I've definitely been in ceremonies and had confessions of some extremely dark stuff. So, in that case, people say, well, if the shaman is good enough, he can control the energy. And you know what? If you guys are drinking at these big commercial places that have, 20, 30 people, 100 people, even more sometimes, there's no way anyone is managing all of that energy and all of that trauma. And in most cases, your shaman probably isn't operating on that level anyways. In my experience, very few of them are. So, there's just so much that I think that we really need to examine and have a more objective critical approach rather than just sort of accepting whatever narrative is popular and assuming that it's actually valid and true, because it's generally not. You know, the Dieta is audio is choppy. Oh man. Thank you for telling me. Yeah, and the music here, just they're having like a soccer tournament or something down the road, and it just got really, really loud. There's no reason that I can see why the audio should be choppy. Oh, here we go. Hopefully that did fix it. And so here's the thing. Here's my approach, right? And like I said, this isn't necessarily going to be appropriate for everyone, but I think it should be really helpful, you know. Something that I observed in the last couple of weeks, you know, people talking about the Dieta and how this minor deviation from the Dieta, somebody was angry because somebody put a little bit of panela, which is like unprocessed sugar, in a tea during a Dieta, and they were furious. And somebody else, you know, ate something that wasn't, you know, and they blame that for the entire course of their transformation being thrown off. That's absolutely ridiculous. And what I see happening in this industry is the same thing that happens with every other spiritual protocol, every other spiritual practice, every religion. It's the reason that Christianity is so popular, for example. You can just take your traumas and you can take your sins and you can put them on this, you know, just by sort of loving this abstract symbol that you've never met and don't really understand. All of your sins are washed away and you don't have to do anything, and you can be the same, you know, train wreck that you always were, and it's no problem, you're going to heaven, that kind of thing. The Dieta is becoming the Jesus of the plant medicine world. And the reality is that you have to do the work afterwards, you know. I have seen shamans that have no traditional Dieta that are able to guide people and work with people in a way that transcends any of the shamans that I've seen that do long Dietas, you know. And some of the more honest ones that I've worked with have said that, you know, most of these people that have these long Dietas have just made them up, and it's really just about keeping tourists for 6 weeks or something and being able to charge them a ton of money, and that there's not really any traditional basis for it. And that's definitely true. If you look throughout the anthropological record, the only Dietas that you really see are in preparation to become a shaman, abstinence from meat and sex, and that's another area that conflicts with the popular conception, right? It's 2 years usually, 2-3 years of avoiding meat and sex and all of these things. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever they tell you. I mean, that's got nothing to do with the traditional practice. So, you know, all of these things are definitely worthy of consideration. But I think what is even more important than any Dieta, or what you're calling a spirit, or how you're singing an Ikaro, is the psychological and emotional and other types of preparation and education that you have before entering into these spaces. You know, I don't think that the Western mentality of following leaders and following religious doctrines to a letter should be applied to plant medicine. That is not what these things are for. The solution to the toxic Western culture and the culture that gives rise to all of these predators and elites that are taking advantage of entire populations of people is autonomy, is for people to learn to find the truth within themselves, to have the courage to look for it themselves, to admit, first of all, that they do not know. And the way that it looks to me is that most people can't even handle an interim where they don't think they know the answers. So people may have some type of existential crisis, and they immediately go and drink ayahuasca and decide that they believe that Pachamama is literally the female spirit of this ayahuasca vine, and all of the things that the people around them in the circle believe, and then they start wearing cotton tone or earth tone cotton pants, and they have an ayahuasca earplug, and they become vegan, and they start using the same language that all of the people around them use, and you've totally defeated the purpose. Your growth and development and your journey has basically stopped. It might be better than your... It might be better than your previous life as an office worker, without any depth and substance. But it's not optimal, to just go into these circles and develop these beliefs and just conform to a new narrative. This is not, this is not the solution. It's not the answer. Real spiritual development comes from knowledge of psychology and observation of the natural world, in my opinion. This is how all natural systems, including shamanism, came to be developed in the first place. And what I'm seeing with plant medicine is that people believe they found a shortcut. They think that they can just consume this medicine and then they're going to have the knowledge of a bona fide shaman eventually. This is not true. It's not even remotely true. And adopting superstitions from other people that's not growth and development. That's not knowledge. That's just dogma. What you actually have to do is overcome intellectual laziness. You have to avail yourselves of all of the different forms of knowledge, all of the different systems in the world. Look for commonalities between the beliefs of the Shuar and the Kabbalah and all of these different systems, and then learn to extract the things that are useful and meaningful to you in the context of your own life and your relationship with the universe, rather than making these adaptations based on other people's experience. That's the prevalent modality that I'm seeing, and it's a shame. I'm not going to say I've lost faith in psychedelics and plant medicine to help to restore people and to develop them and make them whole again and all of this kind of thing. But it is really disappointing to see how the profit motive and the fact that spiritual bypassing is so tempting for people. It has almost ruined it. And another influence that's ruining it is the sort of mainstream adaptation, which at first, we're all rooting it on and we're saying, this is amazing that, the mainstream is consuming all these mushrooms and everyone will wake up and it'll be wonderful. But what's happening instead of that is they're actually being used to create conformity in people. They may be a little bit more open-minded. They may be able to resolve some traumas and be a little bit happier. But there are definitely a lot of coaches and a lot of institutions that are basically trying to figure out how to use psychedelics to make people more well-adapted, normal citizens. And for me, that's taking our primary sacrament and turning it against us, right? And then again, as I was saying about the temptation that people face to turn, to use spiritual bypassing as a sort of marketing tool, just conform to the Dieta, drink the medicine, and you will be transformed. No, you'll be open and you'll be receptive, and you will have less blind spots, and your parameters of your perceptual apparatus will have a wider sweep. So you will be able to, perceive more subtle manifestations of the universe. But, if you're just trying to adapt to the worldview of the shaman or the people around you, you are just falling into another trap. For me, it's really important. I have always learned, when I worked around Shuar people, I learned what they believed about what they were doing, why they were doing what they do, and I make sure that I understand that. But what you really need to take away from it, not the idiosyncrasies of the tradition, but the function behind the practices. That is the thing to learn and retain. And in traditional shamanism, it used to be much more individualistic. So every shaman was looking to find his own songs, to make his own music, to make his own versions of all of these different medicines. And what has happened as these things have moved into a mainstream culture where herd conformity is almost like God, that mentality is being transferred. So, so many of these retreat centers and shamans are developing cults around them, and it's becoming a cult-like, the entire industry really, because we have all of this always happens, by the way. This is normal cult mentality. People become sort of separate from the mainstream, and they have their own ideas about things that are the same, and so they sort of coagulate into this entity of misguided, brainwashed people. Let me check in with the chat real quick and see what is going on. Yeah, the AI generated. By the way, you guys, there has been some really bad news on the AI front in the last week or so in regards to some things that governments are trying to do. And it is, I'm really trying to avoid the paranoid perspective and focus on the positive and what we can do to overcome all these things. For example, I am totally committed to learning Python and getting myself educated with AI to the point where, it's a career, basically. Even to the extent of, I wouldn't say abandoning plant medicine, but definitely it's just the AI is the main focal point. But anyways, I'm going to do a stream on Monday about what's happening with this legislation. Please get everyone you can to come and watch it. Because it's really important that we all are aware. And the reason it's important that we're all aware is because of the way AI works. We have the ability to kind of fight back to an extent, and we have an obligation to. Because our one tool, other than psychedelics and plant medicine, that we can use to leverage, against the totalitarian state is AI. So we need to make sure that we protect it at all costs. Yeah, and so, this whole concept of becoming your own shaman, I mean, most of the people that watch my channel don't really need to hear this, but maybe you could be encouraged to encourage other people to maintain their independence and to be aware of the necessity of developing your own relationship, and to also just, train yourself to be mindful and aware of the pitfalls and make sure that you're not stepping into any of them. Make your own music, learn your own techniques. Do not develop tunnel vision. It's not just about ayahuasca. When you look at my channel, a lot of people have actually criticized me, like, why don't you just stick to the plant medicine? Because it's not the point. It's a tool. It's a tool in a tool bag that is full of all kinds of stuff. We have ritual magic from the Western occult tradition that, in terms of the ritual, the construction, the engineering of the ritual, so much more sophisticated and so much more appropriate for a person coming from the kind of background that I come from, with the kind of intentions that I do, that, if I had this tunnel vision where I'm focused on one type of tradition, it's going to cost me a tremendous amount of potential, and we don't want that. We want to maximize everything and to avoid the snares and pitfalls of narrow-mindedness and ego and dogma. And it is extremely frustrating for me because I feel like, a few years ago, I definitely had a much more, I guess, naive optimism. And it's easy for me to have a sort of bubble perceptually because I have ceremony with people from my community, from my channel. So they're a certain type of person. And I interface with that type of person mostly, and then I'm in the jungle. It's been mostly the fact that over the last couple of months, I've actually been in places where people that are more exposed to the industrial mainstream concept of ayahuasca, and I've learned that I really can't stand to be around them at all. I mean, it's really bad, really, really bad. The mimicry and the, just the sort of psychological disposition and this holier than thou attitude and it really, it really caused me to kind of reappraise what I think the capacities and potential are for these medicines, like what they really can do for people, what I thought they could do for people compared to what I see them doing to people are quite different. But it's not because of the medicine not actually having the potential. It's the context that it's being used in. These collective ceremonies where a bunch of strangers get together and they pay someone to drink the medicine, that should be a catalyst to a new version of their old life. It should not define them. And I don't know what's driving it. I guess maybe it's just that every single person wants to make a career out of it, maybe, and that's the real motivation, that everyone is trying to adapt the behaviors of everyone around them. Or perhaps it's just primate psychology, and monkeys are highly imitative, so they just do that naturally. I'm not really sure exactly why I'm seeing what I'm seeing. I just know that I don't like it. And a lot of people also have this attitude that, LSD is a unnatural psychedelic, and so it's not as good. But I would say that overall, what I've seen in like the LSD counterculture in California and other places in the United States, it definitely fosters that individualism. And you don't really see people doing this herd conformity thing in the LSD culture so much. So I'm almost at this point, well, actually not almost. I actually do favor LSD, to be honest, over any plant medicine, I think, for a number of reasons. And see what this has done to me? I was nervous even to say that because I know the kind of judgment that people have about it. So, it's interesting to take note of that it's even had an influence on me and made me afraid to say certain things. Not really, I hesitated. How long have I been using ayahuasca? Probably 10 years, I guess, at this point. I've taken other psychedelics for 25 years, though. And I started studying all of these things well before I actually consumed any of them, well into my childhood. So, there are a few things that I think it is important to retain. When I talk about how important individualism is, and not just adapting the behaviors and traditions of other people, it's not that we need to abandon you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, I guess is what I'm saying. You know, I am a huge advocate of completely eliminating Christianity from the planet, right? But I would like to retain love your neighbor as you would love yourself, and then get rid of all the rest of it, right? That's like all we need, one line from the Bible, and then you can just, you know, drop a little mini nuke on the rest of it and get rid of it, you know? So that's kind of the way I look at everything. The distillation, you know, the alchemical process of extracting the wheat from the chaff and transforming the lead into the gold, you know, we keep what we really need. And one of the things that I think is a great tool or a great approach to figuring out what is the dross and what is, you know, the stuff of value is to look for these consistencies that are completely ubiquitous. And there are a bunch of them. And I'm actually going to have to cut this stream short because this whomping bass that's coming from on the other side of the, I don't know what's going on. It's never happened before. It's so loud and confusing that I just can't think straight. So I'm just going to talk for a few more minutes and then I'm just going to stop and maybe we'll jump back into this topic. But honestly, this entire stream, I've been barely able to maintain my focus because it's just like whomping and yelling. I don't understand who, you know, why would you listen to that kind of music? Like really fast womp with no other sounds. It's just like, how could that be pleasant for anyone? It's just destroying my mind right now. But what I was saying is there are these consistencies that are ubiquitous all over the planet, right? It doesn't matter whether you're a druidic magician or you are an ayahuasca shaman or a Freemason or a hermetic magician, whoever it is, wherever they are, a witch, you know. Wiccan doesn't really count because it's not real. Harold Gardner just went and interviewed Aleister Crowley for 2 weeks and then made up the story about the witches when his publisher balked. This is actually what happened. The publisher was like, oh, no, because Crowley was known as the wickedest man in the world. The publisher was going to refuse to publish the book. So on the spot, Gardner came up with that stupid story about how the witches cult had taught him this stuff when really he just interviewed Crowley for 2 weeks. You know, I mean, look at his phrase, do as thou wilt and harm me none. Do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Like, come on, obviously. But I almost said Wicca, but then, you know, there's no point in distinguishing it because it's not real. It's just, he just copied it from the Western occult tradition. But the point is that in all of these traditions, you have the idea of casting a protective circle that represents the universe of the magician that's doing the working. And so, you know, when you have ayahuasca ceremony, at least in the tradition that I was taught in, the people in the ceremony represent the circle. And just after the medicine kicks in, like generally as soon as we sense that the medicine is starting to work, will be an ikaro. It's very simple. With the limpieza, there's just the sound of the leaves rustling, basically, and a walk around the perimeter, absorbing negative energy and establishing a perimeter, and then the shaman usually will vomit a bunch because he's just absorbed a bunch of stuff from all these people. But, you know, in the Hermetic temple as well, you cast a circle that represents the universe. And then in almost every single tradition, whether it's North America, South America, Russia, Mongolian, in the jungles of Borneo, the four elements, or not the four elements, the four directions will be acknowledged in some way, shape, or form. So that is a symbolic gesture of orientation. You know, that's another thing that I forgot to mention, that, you know, after you figure out, you know, what does everyone do? Like literally everyone, even if they're disparate cultures, you know, when you see that, there's probably a reason for it, you know? And so retaining those things is important, but you must know why you're doing them, right? And so the circle represents the microcosm. It's the area that you are defining, and you determine what forces can enter it and which cannot, and you are God of that universe, basically. And every single one of these traditions that I'm aware of, it's some variation of that idea, you know, and that's pretty remarkable that you would have a consistency of that degree of specificity in the context of a spiritual practice, which, the atheist, or not atheist, but the deterministic, materialist would say that these are subjective traditions that were created from the imagination of people. And the fact that there is a blueprint that exists kind of challenges that, I think. So there's always some form of acknowledgement of the four directions. There is oftentimes also connection with four elements in each of those directions. And all of these things have a symbolic function. So for a person that doesn't have any belief in a spirit world even, going through this process of orientating yourself, of defining your universe, orienting yourself, and making the symbolic connections between water and emotion in this direction, and categorizing and organizing the environment to reflect your being as well. These are all valuable practices, regardless of your interpretation of what's happening. That's another, I think, perspective, or, a general tool that you can use to sift through things. What is the functionality here? And all of these things have plain and obvious function that makes sense, I think, for anyone. Another consistency, of course, is the use of sound to regulate the environment. I have seen really remarkable things happen with sound and responses in people, to specific sounds, when I know the intention is a very specific response in the person that the sound is directed at, right? So this idea of Icaros, or even rattles, or it can even be songs. And maybe an even better example of that is that in the tradition of the Grateful Dead, I guess, it's really the same kind of idea, but it's more specific information, really. Are concepts that are sort of transferred directly from the consciousness of the musicians into the audience by means of vibration. And that is something that I've gotten feedback about with many different audiences in many places around the United States. And so it's definitely not a belief that is restricted to this one demographic. It's not like it's something the Grateful Dead made me aware of, but it definitely is not a belief that this Grateful Dead cult holds, So, yeah, man, they're just so loud over there. I'm about to tap out, I think. Let me check in with the chat again. Oh, headphones maybe would. No, it's loud. I mean, that helps a little bit, but it's really too loud. By the way, you guys, hit the like button, share, subscribe. Consider joining us on Patreon or one of the other options in the chat to support us. We're demonetized, and so we rely on our community for support. I'll probably do a music stream later. Last night it was a train wreck because I was still trying to get OBS to do the multi-streaming thing, and it was just going insane. So it didn't work out too well last night. We're hoping for a better response tonight. So, and then of course the Dieta, really, more than anything, I think, there's two things that are important when you're dealing with enzymes and proteins and different compounds that are volatile. They respond to heat. They combine in, what do you need? This. They combine in different ways. Your body also has a tremendous number of compounds in it. And so when you have a dieta, you're basically resetting your enzymatic distribution and all sorts of different, your pH and all kinds of things throughout the body. And the consumption of small amounts of various plants while you're in this very clean state can for sure catalyze all the creation of all kinds of new medicines in the body. That is definitely 100% factual. But in most cases, the preparation to enter into the medicine state and the Dieta is mostly a declaration of will and discipline and intent, you know? So point being in that regard that your most powerful tool, you know, people talk a lot about integration after the fact, but the preparation beforehand is equally important. And I don't really see a lot of people out there that are coming from a non-traditional place or a syncretic place where, you know, people are getting psychological tools. They're, you know, I personally think that before you have a very high dose psychedelic experience, you should learn critical thinking, you know, make sure that your critical thinking is developed and sophisticated, and that your skepticism is healthy, and that your ability to put a voice in your head in its proper place is where it needs to be, you know, because it's actually more harmful than it is helpful if people are predisposed to woo and predisposed to superstition to take these compounds, and now they're thinking that whatever voices in their head are talking to them are literally telling them the truth, you know. And the fact that we come from a culture that has a hierarchical conception of religion, so we think if there's a voice in our head that is disembodied, that it's God, and therefore you should do what it tells you, and that's not good. People die because of that, you know, that belief, and that is not the way to go about this. And when I talk about these experiences that I've had where there was a voice in my head and then something happened that confirmed that that voice was telling the truth, if you pay attention, you'll notice that it is extremely rare that I confirmed the message from the voice in my head by pursuing some specific course of action. There are only a couple of extreme cases where I took any kind of risk or, you know, really put anything on the line because of that sort of intuition. And it is true that it turned out to be correct, you know. And I have also, I'm fully acknowledging that I have received accurate information from apparent DMT entities on numerous occasions, and I have never really received any false information. But I have gotten signals that I could not be certain whether they were my subconscious or if they were legitimate intuitions. This happens from time to time. There are ways to increase your aptitude to be able to recognize when it's a wish demon and when it's actual intuition. But this is something that I see limiting the ability of the medicine to help people, for one thing, because they are invested in this idea that, well, this is a real spirit, so what it tells me should be true, and then they go and pursue it and discover that it wasn't true, and now they don't trust the medicine, and the side effect of that is that the medicine is unable to alleviate their spiritual burdens to the extent that it could, because they have misapplied, they have had a misapprehension of what it's about and where it should be going, you know. So I think that one of the key pieces of advice, the key takeaway here, is that, like, yes, of course you should pay attention to your intuition. But I think that if you just follow out the natural course of your life, and unless it's really extreme, you know, this input that you're getting from the intuition, you don't really need to change anything. You know, you don't need to pursue anything that is out of the course of what your life is dictating to you. You know, I see this a lot, you know, and oftentimes it's just relationship stuff and whatnot. People say that the medicine told me this was my soulmate, and they go after the person and they just get blown off, and they're like, oh, the medicine lied to me. You know, so I hope I'm communicating that well. It's really important to have a balance and to understand that there's never going to be a voice in your head that is right 100% of the time. When I was actually learning, one of the things that really surprised me is that the shaman, who I would have thought would be inclined to exaggerate the capacities of this medicine and the reality of these spirits, right? Because we would get into arguments all the time, you know, because I said I don't really believe that these spirits have an objective existence. I'm more of the position that there is a field of consciousness, and that these experiences kind of come from our consciousness interfacing with it, and it sort of gives a greater level of coherence to what is normally just sort of a field of potential or something. You know, and he would get mad, and not really mad, but irritated, and he would say, well, let's just play a game, just for the purpose of this experience, just, you know, pretend that you believe in spirits. And of course, I'm not capable of doing that. So I would never relent and pretend to believe that they're objectively real, you know. So when he would encourage me to question the messages I'm getting from the medicine, and he wouldn't necessarily even act on the messages he was getting with certainty, you know. And I one of the reasons that I'm mentioning this is that I have seen over and over and over and over again these shamans that are, you know, they are coming from a place of profit motive, you know. They're marketing, they're overselling the medicine, or they really believe that their magic can do more for them than it can, right? Ego drives that process a lot. There are lots and lots and lots of shamans out there that genuinely believe that they can do things that they cannot do. And people are wired to believe in other people. And, you know, as time goes on and I watch this industry progress and I see the sort of cult-like behavior of people increasing and the dogmatic, like religious kind of fervor that they have around a lot of the ideas and stuff, it's, you know, it's really having the opposite effect that we need it to have. And that makes me sad because, you know, can't change human nature though. And here's a final thought about this, because it's just so loud I can't take it anymore. It's really like I'm like struggling to maintain my focus quite a bit. In fact, I forgot. Okay, I got it. One of the things that occurred to me recently, a good way to understand this, and it's another way to sort of detach ourselves in a healthy way so that we can focus on our own development and not really worry so much about the masses, because the masses are going to work out their own problems, right? That's not really our jurisdiction. I used to really think it was, you know, my life goal was to try to help to like wake up humanity, and it still kind of is. But I have definitely been forced to accept the fact that most of them, like it says in the Bible, let he who is dirty be dirty still, and let he who is rich be rich still, or whatever, you know. I mean, it's kind of that sort of thing where if you're the kind of person that is going to adapt a narrative from the mainstream and follow that, if you had a religion and you just believed in that, I mean, whatever was written in the book, you might free yourself from that narrative, but there's almost 100% chance you're just going to adopt another one. You know what I mean? So really, I think there are two kinds of people. There are those who have the capacity to wake up, and once they do, will continue to develop. And then there is the other type that is not intended to wake up, that is not wired to wake up, that will never wake up. And there's literally no point in even bothering with them. The thing that can happen, though, is mass formation psychosis can be disrupted a little bit. The tethers, the specificities, the details of the culture can be shifted. The perspective of the collective can be somewhat reoriented, and that can liberate those people to an extent. You can create a healthy narrative for them to conform to. And I really had hoped that that is what was happening in plant medicine. But like I said, over the last couple of months, I have just seen, part of it I think is that I'm in an area where I've never lived in or worked with commercial ayahuasca people. Never. My teacher was not, you cannot find him on the internet. He does not advertise, only word of mouth. You'll never see his face. Well, that's not true. Actually, his, what do you call it? Like, environmental, work is online. But he doesn't mention any of the shamanic work there. And all the other shamans that I worked with were like jungle, no, you will not find a website. There's nothing. So I guess I've never really seen this before. And now I'm in Peru around Iquitos and Pucallpa, where there actually are a lot of people that that's their knowledge of plant medicine. And the level of judgment and, holier than thou attitudes and lack of self-awareness and stuff, it really made me recalibrate, like, what does this stuff actually do for people? Yeah, I haven't even seen how many people are in here, and I'm a little bit annoyed that I managed to, 30 people. This is the shorts feed. That's why. By the way, you guys, do hit the like button, share, subscribe, and that means that there are even more people in the horizontal chat. Yeah, there's an entire... No, it's the same. Again, it's the same. Man, I guess it's still not working. That's too bad. We're supposed to have a horizontal and a vertical, and we do not. Yeah, but the one thing I'm noticing, it must be the shorts feed. I don't know, because there's far fewer likes than normal in there. But yeah, do me a favor, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. If you're interested in the secret streams, actually, when I pop off of here, I'm going to do the secret stream. Today we're talking about the Fool of the Tarot, but it's not really about the Tarot. We're going way deep into the archetypal stuff, and really the significance of zero is much greater than a lot of people realize. It's a very important aspect of the occult, and so yeah, you guys, education. One of the consequences, I think, of the realization that, science has been corporatized, that scientists often believe whatever it is that their benefactors want them to conclude. I recently saw an example of a researcher from Princeton who, it was eggs, I think, and he was approached to be paid to refute a colleague's paper, and he refused, not on the grounds that what he was being asked to say wasn't true, but on the grounds that this colleague was a friend of his. And he didn't want the static. He didn't want the smoke. So that really hit me, like, wow. And this was Princeton. And this guy was like, I think it was a newspaper or something he was talking to, And it really also proved that this is standard for them, even at what is supposed to be the most respected level of educational institution in the world. They are that corrupt, So it makes sense to me that people are having issues with science and they're kind of rejecting all of that stuff. But it's also laziness, and particularly intellectual laziness. We have all been educated in a society that is being socially engineered for stupidity, right? I mean, look at the flat earther movement. That's actually real still, So there's this distrust of anything that sounds like science or that's institution. And people confuse that sort of corporatized science with the kind of knowledge that you need to pursue to have an effective spiritual life. Studying psychology, the works of Jung, or any great psychologist, keeping abreast of studies that are not tied to big pharma, studying physics, observation of natural phenomena on your own, even, increasing your level of understanding of mathematics. You have to do these kind of mental exercises if you're going to develop your consciousness to a degree that it is able to deploy the changes that are effectualized by psychedelics and plant medicine. You have to do all that shit. You have to create a fertile ground for these seeds to grow in. You don't just do a dieta and then imitate your shaman and all of a sudden you're a sorcerer. That's not how it works. The real purpose of any kind of magical practice, of any kind of expansion of consciousness, is to connect with your genius, your higher self, to expand your capacity to contribute creatively to your tribe or your nation or your whatever it is, based on these transcendental experiences. And those contributions are enriched because those transcendental experiences are imbued with an understanding of your collective role in the tribe, village, or society in which you're an integrated constituent, right? So, that's the reality to it. That is how you get the most medicine from, or the most mileage from plant medicine. It doesn't come from believing in spirits. It doesn't come from imitating an Icaro exactly as you heard it. It doesn't come from learning fake ayahuasca songs that are actually just Spanish romance music with saying Pachamama over and over again. You know what I mean? That's not it. That's not it. That doesn't make you a shaman. That doesn't heal you. Doesn't do anything. You have to do all of this other stuff if you're really serious about developing yourself into a wizard or a magician or a shaman. You have to expand your consciousness. You have to create the capacity within yourself to actually functionally deploy an expanded mind. That's the reality, And it's an amazing fact that psychedelics and other medicines that fall under that category, more or less, actually do help you to upgrade your hardware so that you can run this more advanced software. The neuroplasticity and neurogenesis that occurs in the brain is basically a hardware upgrade. But the thing is, if you are not determining exactly how that information flows, and you don't have a clearly preconceived concept of what kind of changes you're trying to affect, you are just randomly making a bunch of connections in there, and you're just going to become so open-minded that wind is whistling through your ears and you're a muddle-headed mystic, and it's not an upgrade. So that's the news that no one wants to hear, that Christianity, the major flaw is that the idea that you can just put your sins on someone else and then you can just go on with your life without working on yourself. That's the deadly flaw in this. I don't even know what to call it. The religion, I guess. And plant medicine is having the same problem. It's being promoted. I guess a panacea is the word. It's being promoted in that way. People are being encouraged to believe in that way. No one wants to be told, that you have to crack open books and, that you need to educate yourself and you have to do all this difficult, tedious work in order to improve yourself, no matter what plants you're drinking, period, end of story, At least that's my opinion about it. So thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider joining our Patreon and supporting my mission to eradicate dumb fuckery from the planet, one flat earther at a time. Good evening.